5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live. It's Lichtman Live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, welcome to our brilliant and astute audience. We're here to give you the in-depth story, not the usual blather you hear on the media, not the partisan give and take. And events are moving so fast, it's hard to keep track of them, right? We have war. We have a ceasefire. We have breaking the ceasefire. We have the ceasefire holding.
It's kind of making my head spin.
It should make you. This is all in a couple of days. You know, usually these things take months or even years. So let us presume something that is not by any means established as true, Sam.
Okay, what's that?
That the ceasefire will hold, okay?
Right, that's our titular question is the Iran-Israel war really over?
I'm going to get to that.
Oh.
But I want to give this a bigger scope first.
Okay.
All right? So let's assume for a moment that at least in the near term it's over. By the way, to address our big question, by no means in the long term is the conflict between Iran and Israel over. It hasn't been settled. It hasn't been solved by any means. Now, what's the big picture? First of all, you know, Trump measures everything in terms of what, Sam?
He measures everything? I don't know.
Personal wins and losses, right? That's all that matters.
Oh, okay.
So he claims, I've got to win, you know, in the Middle East because I brokered the ceasefire. Let's give him that. Let's assume for a moment, which we can't assume, but just for argument's sake, that the ceasefire will hold at least in the near term over the next several months. It does not solve the fundamental problem of Iran developing a nuclear weapon. Why did we get to war in the first place over Iran's nuclear capacity, Sam?
Tell me.
Because Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear accords, which took effect in 2016 and postponed till at least 2031, 6 years from now, Iran even beginning to get to the threshold of a bomb by enriching uranium beyond minimal levels. It's got to go up to 90%. And presuming, you know, the accords were not renewed or another agreement wasn't reached, they would have to start the process in 2031, putting them several years down the road to where they are right now. So this whole conflict comes out of the fruit of the poison tree of Trump pulling out. Did he pull out, Sam, because Iran was not upholding to the accords?
No.
No, twice, just before he pulled out. His own administration said Iran was complying with the provisions of the accord as the international inspectors have agreed. Two things, you know, resulted from his pulling out. They were able to move at least 5 to 10 years, maybe much more than that, in advance to get to the threshold of a bomb. Whether they're actually producing a bomb, according to American intelligence, which Trump, of course, disregards because it doesn't suit his purposes, they were not at the moment building a bomb. The other thing that is so negative about the accords pulling out is we don't know where their facilities, we don't know where their enriched uranium is or anything else, because we lost the ability to inspect, right, Sam?
Sure.
And according to the DIA assessment, and even according to the Israelis, they could have this enriched uranium, which I think is about 60% at this point, anywhere. They could have centrifuges that are used to enrich uranium anywhere. And we have no idea of where they are because we lost our capacity in 2018 to do on-site inspections in Iraq. Here's the other really dangerous thing about these this peace accord. Is it tied to a diplomatic agreement, Sam, about Iran's nuclear capacity?
No.
No, there is no agreement. And according to Trump, we don't need an agreement. He would like to have one, but basically he has said this. Iran's nuclear program has been, quote, obliterated and, quote, totally destroyed by the U.S. strikes. Is that what the U.S. intelligence community has concluded?
You asked me a lot of questions, man.
All right. You don't have to answer.
The answer is no.
Yes, you're a smart kid. You answered all my questions correctly.
I'm a kid.
Well, for me, you are. Right. Losing your hair is not undermine your intelligence.
I didn't lose my hair. I still have hair.
Tell the audience why.
Should I?
Why not? You don't have to name any names.
People were in the chat. Everybody was freaking out about my hair. It was sort of
Of course they are.
The talk of the town. One of my best friend's son, it's very treatable, but he has cancer, and he was starting to lose his hair. So me, his dad, and his son, to help him feel better about shaving his head, we all shaved our heads together. So this is in honor of my friend's son, who again has a very treatable form of cancer, but does have cancer. So this is for him. And we had a nice little shaving head party last night, and we had pizza, and he seemed to really enjoy it, and it seemed to make his head shaving a little bit less stressful. So it was all for a good cause. But now I have no hair.
Yes, although I'm not a big fan of the look, I'm very proud of you, Sam.
Rub it.
For doing what you needed to do for your friend's son. That was a very extraordinary gesture. And being a cancer survivor myself, I can really understand it. So let's get back to the point here. So Trump says we've wiped out their nuclear capacity. Don't have to really make a treaty a priority because they don't have a nuclear capacity anymore. When did he say that? Right after the strike, before there was any damage assessment. Why did he say that? Like he says everything else, because truth is irrelevant. He thinks it benefited him to claim that the strikes he ordered were, as he always says, the greatest thing we've ever seen, the most successful. I won in a landslide in 2020, you name it. A complete fabrication based on nothing. And now, of course, he's claiming the defense intelligence assessment, the Israeli assessment, is wrong. No facts to challenge it. And what they have said was, at worst, it has put back the capacity of the Iranians to build a nuclear weapon by a few months. So while the situation is so fluid, and things literally change by the hour, we don't know what the ultimate denouement is going to be. But there's a very fair chance that this is one of those operations that has a boomerang, that is unintended consequences that are just the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. That is, it could be the regime hunkers down and realizes the only way it's ever going to protect itself, like North Korea, is by developing its own nuclear weapons. Otherwise, it's going to be vulnerable. Something, again, according to our intelligence assessment, it was not directly doing immediately before the airstrikes. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I am saying there is a huge danger by decoupling the ceasefire from a diplomatic agreement that would reestablish the JCPOA or establish some other verifiable means of preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Another big point here. In a sense, this is all a sideshow.
Tell me why.
Iran poses no danger to the United States. Even it developed a nuclear weapon, which it wasn't doing, and we could have stopped it. It has no capacity to strike against the United States. It's not a direct threat to the United States. The direct threat to the United States comes from North Korea, a far more serious threat. But Trump did nothing about preventing the North Korean nuclear program because he was in love. Remember that, Sam?
Right.
With Kim Jong-un. Is Kim Jong-un a nice guy?
Well, don't forget that all started first because he was starting to beef with with the Korean leader. And then eventually they became best friends through that.
Yeah, and this guy is a murderous thug. He kills political opponents with anti-aircraft guns. He is one of the most murderous dictators we have on the planet. And Trump said he's in love with him. And this in-love diplomacy yielded what, Sam? Nothing. North Korea went ahead, both with its nuclear program and with its missile program. And unlike Iran, North Korea, at least in theory, if not in practice, and maybe in practice, has the capacity to launch a nuclear attack against the United States. So in a sense, you know, what's happening with Iran and nuclear weapons is important, but it's a sideshow compared to what's happening in North Korea. And in Asia, what's the other big threat?
China.
China, you know. China has a fully developed nuclear weapons program. It has nuclear subs. It has intercontinental ballistic missiles. And what has it had its eye on for some time that it would love to conquer, Sam?
The great country of Taiwan.
Taiwan. You know, I've been to Taiwan. It's an amazing place, and it's not a pushover. But, you know, with the distractions in Iran, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I still think it's unlikely, but we got to watch out for what's going to happen with China and Iran. Ukraine, with American resources being diverted to Iran, this makes things easier for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. He cares 10 times more about Ukraine than he does in Iran. That's, you know, on his border in Europe. It's part of his broad strategy to recreate the Soviet empire. So to the extent to which the U.S. diverts resources to the Middle East, gets embroiled in wars there, that makes it that much easier, you know, despite the incredible resistance of the Ukrainian people, for Putin to operate in the Ukraine. What else is going on in the Middle East? That's way more deadly than anything going on between Iran and Israel.
Gaza.
That war hasn't let up. Tens of thousands. I mean, there are various different estimates. I'm not verifying any one estimate, but clearly it's in the tens of thousands of Gazans have been killed, most of them civilians. There is real credible evidence that Israel has committed atrocities, war crimes in Gaza, and that's still going on while we're being diverted to Iran. So I don't want to say Iran is a diversion, but in a sense it is. You know, the real threats and tragedies are in Gaza, Ukraine, and the Far East involving North Korea and China. Much more difficult problems to solve than dropping some bunker bombs on facilities in Iran, which, according to our best intelligence, only delayed for a little while their capacity to develop a nuclear weapon, and may or may not have strengthened their resolve to develop a nuclear weapon. Now, Sam, when George W. Bush invaded Iraq, something, of course, Trump has been wildly critical of, although only after the fact, you probably don't remember, you're probably too young, but I think I apprised you of the approval for his action.
It's pretty low. Oh, it's
No.
pretty high. I mean, it's pretty
About
high.
70% or higher.
Yeah.
Now let's show the data for Donald Trump.
Okay, it's up.
It's up. All right, first of all, before we get to the overall approval, it's pretty obvious he is appealing only to his Republican base. 85% approval compared to 13% from Democrats. And critically, the swing between them, right, the independents.
Swing.
The swing, you know, we know Democrats are not going to vote for Republicans. Republicans are not going to vote for Democrats. So elections are decided by the independents. 28 points underwater. 28 points. 36% approve. 28% do not approve. Now look at the overall numbers. Remember, G.W. Bush was at about 70% or higher. Trump, even with 85% approval from Republicans, is at 44%. 56% disapprove, underwater by 12 points. That's unheard of in the immediate aftermath of American military action. There is almost always, as we saw in the Iraqi war, a rally around the flag effect. Over time, that will erode, as we saw with the Iraqi war, but in the immediate aftermath, the approval is usually very high. When his dad, George H.W. Bush, intervened with great success in the Gulf War, his approval rating hit 90%.
It did?
90%. Can you imagine that?
And then he lost.
Then he lost, but that was later for other reasons, of course. But you can see how dismal these approval ratings. I want to make one other point.
Make it.
Why does Trump say, without any evidence and knowing he could be contradicted, that we've totally obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity? Because that's all his supporters will hear, right, Sam?
Right.
Are they going to follow the defense intelligence assessment?
No.
No. They're only going to remember, as well as, independents who lean MAGA, they're only going to remember, oh, Trump told us we've totally obliterated their nuclear capacity. We don't have to listen, and they probably won't even know, what some obscure agency that we never heard of had to say. This is typical Trump MO. It's the big lie. You tell a lie loudly and often enough, and people come to believe it. And people are not fact checkers. And who has the biggest megaphone of anyone? The President of the United States. How is our contest coming, Sam? Do we have any updates?
I don't think we have any updates right now. I think it's just an ongoing contest that people can enter.
It's really important. You know who Joy Reid is, Sam?
Yes.
Is she conservative or liberal?
Pretty liberal.
Completely liberal. And she says, I just read it today, she echoed what we've been saying forever, for months, maybe over a year on the show, that the Democrats have no message.
There is a Democratic primary happening tonight, actually.
That's right, in New York City.
New York City, I think.
Let's know what's going on if you have it.
Yeah, let me pull that up.
Sure.
I think Zoran is ahead.
Thank goodness.
See. Yeah, how did Cuomo get back into the picture?
Name recognition.
I know, but it's just crazy.
That's huge.
Also, I want to say I was reading the chat. Thank you to all the love and support. I appreciate that. Let me zoom in.
Hey, let me say in the meantime, while he's getting that up, you could be saving the Democratic Party.
No doubt.
Someone's got to save it. They're not saving themselves.
No doubt. All right. Yeah.
It's a crush.
Zoran Mamdani is way ahead.
8.6 points.
With 40% reporting. Oh, Dad, Paperboy Prince only has 0.1%.
What?
I know.
1/10 of 1%, yeah.
That's what I said, 0.1%.
Oh, you got it. Yeah. What a tragedy.
Are you sad about Paperboy Prince?
I have nothing to say about him.
Yeah. So you think Mamdani's going to win?
Yes. I mean, New York is a little different than a lot of states. So if you look at, like, Pennsylvania, not in a primary, but in a general election, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia go overwhelmingly Democrat. The rural areas go overwhelmingly Republican. In other words, there's a big divide. I don't think in a Democratic primary and I haven't followed New York City politics for a long time. I left there when I was 16, but I don't think there's that much of a divide within the Democratic primary electorate that Cuomo could overcome. He'd have to be getting, 54, 55% of the vote. That seems unlikely.
Cuomo is winning in the Bronx, though.
The Bronx, no tonks. But look how few votes there are. Doesn't mean anything.
Right. Zoran's winning in Manhattan, in Queens, in Brooklyn, and Cuomo's winning in the Bronx and Staten Island.
Staten Island is different.
Yeah.
Staten Island, New York is overwhelmingly minority, but except for Staten Island.
Right.
Which is more conservative, more white.
I thought I saw Kornacki saying today that it might be like days before we get results, but it seems like we're going to get results. We're going to get a winner tonight, right?
Yeah, we're already up to 43%, and the lead is still strong.
Yeah.
Still 8.4 points. It really didn't change markedly.
Let's
call it.
Oh.
We're going to call it for Mamdani.
Already, it's done. It's over.
It's done. It's over. He will be the next mayor of New York.
That's the first. He's like the first super progressive mayor of New York in a while.
In a very long time.
At least in recent memory, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there were ones in the past, though, right?
Well, Fiorello LaGuardia, it was a Republican.
Right.
But he was a very liberal. Mayor Wagner, who's kind of considered mayor for life for a while, long time ago. After LaGuardia, though, was fairly liberal.
I think Mamdani's mom is like a famous director.
Well, you would know better than I. You're the movie maven.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get to questions and your housekeeping, can you hold my mic for a minute?
Yes.
I want to point out a couple more things.
Oh, point them out.
Yes. Let me get to my. All right. Who is the chief force?
Wait 1 second. Someone says this is just the first round of NYC voting because they have ranked choice voting. So this is just round one.
Oh, okay.
So it's not over.
I wasn't aware of that. That's a very good point.
So this election will advance to ranked choice voting if no candidate is the first choice on a majority.
He's not going to get a majority.
So it's not over.
It's not over.
Oh, no.
But I think it's essentially over.
Okay.
All right. Who is the primary mover of mass deportation among Trump's advisors?
Stephen Miller.
Stephen Miller, and has been that way for a long time. Well, it turns out, according to news reports, including some independent agencies that follow these things, guess what? Stephen Miller has a massive financial conflict of interest. You ever heard of Peter Thiel's company, Palantir?
I have, yes.
And they are intimately involved with the deportation, getting tens of millions of dollars and maybe ultimately more in federal contracts to facilitate the deportation. The more deportation that takes place, the better it is for Palantir, right? Palantir. Guess who holds Palantir stock?
Stephen Miller. I thought you were supposed to, once you became a White House person or a government person, I thought you had to divest all that stuff, no?
It's a gray area.
Right.
You should at least recuse yourself, but he can't recuse himself. He may not directly get involved with contracts to Palantir, but every time they, up the stake in immigration, who does that benefit? Palantir and Stephen Miller. According to this report from one of the government watchdogs, Miller disclosed on his disclosure form, which is mandatory, and unlike the president, all these other employees are subject to mandatory conflict of interest law and conflict of interest reports. So he disclosed from $101,000 to $250,000 of stock in Palantir. Not an insignificant amount of money for a civil servant, right?
Seriously.
Yes. And get this too.
He
reported this in the name of his son, who apparently is like 6 years old or under.
God.
So, yeah, his son is really making his investment. You know, it's a totally transparent, absurd way of trying to disguise what you're doing. So, you know, the White House said, he'll recuse himself, you know, from decisions involving Palantir. Impossible. His strong push to maximize deportations benefits Palantir and puts money in Stephen Miller's pocket, according to, you know, not my own research, but according to research by independent government watchdog agencies. This is a blatant conflict of interest, but it's in an administration. Is this administration right on top of all conflicts of interest?
Oh,
Right on top of it. Yes,
yeah.
They're just vigilant,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to Donald Trump.
Oh, my God.
Making sure there isn't a smidgen of evidence of a conflict of interest. Final point I want to bring up, I'll just bring it up briefly because it's not fully resolved, but apparently the Supreme Court, divided along ideological lines, has given Trump a green light to deport detainees to countries that are not their country of origin. I cannot imagine how they reached that decision. But it's still, the litigation is still going on, and now there is a question about whether they could deport people who are from other countries to one of the most dangerous and unstable countries in the world, in Africa. You know what country we're talking about?
South Sudan.
South Sudan. Can you imagine? And so now that specific question is up before the Supreme Court. So we'll see how this very odd decision actually plays out in practice. And meanwhile,
what are you sipping on?
sun-kissed orange.
This guy loves soda, man. If you're sitting here drinking Diet Sunkist Orange, you got issues.
I don't want to be a model for our audience.
Yeah.
On a very positive note, Trump seems to be losing all of his battles with Harvard. That the courts just stopped him from preventing international students from enrolling at Harvard, and there is now some talk of Trump backing off and reaching a settlement with Harvard. And I bring this up because his attack on Harvard, it's not a one-off. It's part of a very broad attack on education, on memory, on commemoration, exemplified, for example, by returning the names of bases to notorious Confederates, traitors to our country, who fought for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was not states' rights. It was to preserve slavery. And if you look at the Confederate Constitution, it was the most anti-states' rights constitution in the minds of human beings. It gave no latitude for the states to make any policy, not just abolishing, but even weakening slavery within our borders. It's part of his attack on the Smithsonian and other institutions. It's part of his broad attack on higher education. We see it in the states, trying to force our educators to teach according to not the facts of history, not according to sound scholarship, but according to Trump's conservative orthodoxy. And if you don't believe me, I've talked about this a lot, but check it out for yourself. Check out the 1776 report that Trump issued at the end of his first term as a guidance for teaching about our history and our society. The American Historical Association's executive director called it not a work of history, but a political document. It said it bears no relationship to any historical scholarship of the past 40 years. And I've talked about this book before, Spin Doctors. Remember that, Sam?
Oh, I remember.
Which says, how do authoritarians gain control over people? Not necessarily by military means, although that's part of it, but by controlling what we know and what we think. And that's exactly what Trump and his analogs in the States, which are adopting laws implementing false conservative ideology, not to mention all the banning of books, that we've seen in the States and in some of the military academies.
All right. Sometimes I think to myself, I'm not as smart as my dad. I didn't go to a good school as good as he went to. He went to Harvard. I didn't. He's got this successful career. I'm still figuring. When I think of that stuff, I look in the mirror and I say, at least I don't drink Diet Sunkist.
Oh, quiet.
Okay.
I think you're way ahead of me, huh? You probably are.
No, I'm saying I'm not, but I'm saying at least I don't drink that garbage.
All right, that gives you one thing that you're ahead of me on.
There's like
Get out of there.
35 ingredients in that.
And they're all good for you.
Oh, okay. Some housekeeping stuff. If you haven't liked the stream yet, we have 1,600 people watching, but only 500 likes.
What?
That's crazy. Come on, we got to get those likes up. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Turn on that notification bell so you know we're live. You can follow us below. Remember, members and donations get priority on questions. But before we get to that, I have a big announcement. The Lichtman Live Allan Lichtman merch shop is now open for business.
Wow.
Did you even know that was a thing?
Of course not.
Yeah, I don't think you even knew this was a thing.
No. You didn't ask my clearance, huh?
Yeah, I showed you some of these designs.
Yeah, you did show me some of this, but I really didn't pay much attention.
It's Savannah will put it in the chat and pin it. It's Allan-Lichtman.printify.me. And we've got some excellent options here, Dad. We've got your tic-tac-toe smile t-shirt.
Oh my God, from 1981.
That's pretty good. If you just, if you want to rep Lichtman Live.
I was your age then.
You had hair. You had hair.
Yeah.
And a mustache. I have neither. This is maybe my favorite one. This is your famous quote, Republicans have no principles. And on the back it says Democrats have no spine.
Oh, I love that one.
You love that one? I think, even if you're not a Lichtman Live fanatic, you can still get this one. This is one I designed, Dad. It's an FDR graphic tee with FDR and purple lightning. I think it's really cool.
That's really cool.
We've got stickers, car magnets. We also have a bumper sticker here with your slogan. We've got finality. We got a sticker that says finality is not a word we use in politics.
I love this stuff.
Pretty good, huh?
This is the best stuff I've ever seen for political merch. And I'm not just tooting my own horn.
Well, yeah, you're tooting your own horn a little bit. Well, shout out to Savannah because she helped. Well, she set this all up, basically. We got a Lichtman loyalist hat.
Wow. Is that like the alternative to the MAGA hat?
That's the alternative to the MAGA hat. And if you want a sweater with the...
Is it a sweater or a sweatshirt?
Sweatshirt. That's what. Yeah. I kind of like the sweatshirt, honestly. It gives the slogan a little more room to breathe,
So how do they get this stuff?
They go to Allan-Lichtman.printify.me. The prices are here. Get them while they're hot.
While they're hot. I love them.
And also the link is pinned in the chat, and we'll put it in descriptions and link it and stuff like that, so it should be good to go. What's your favorite one, Dad?
It's got to be Republicans have no principles, Democrats have no spine. But I like a lot of them.
Do you like this? I made this FDR one. That's
I love
cool.
the FDR one.
Look at that. That's pretty good.
That's really good.
That's pretty high quality stuff right there.
That really is. My favorite president.
Yeah. All right. So, check out the shop. And if you start...
I like the tic-tac-toe one,
You
too.
like this one?
Reminds me I once was young and sharp.
There's a model wearing your face, Dad.
Yeah. Wow, look at that.
Look at that.
I haven't changed much in like 50 years,
Can you
have
give
I?
us that smile?
Yeah.
You don't smile like that anymore, though.
No?
Sometimes when you're not when you're thinking about it, you don't. But when you're not thinking about it, sometimes you fall into that smile.
I still have the hair.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. You lost.
So that was 1981. That's what, 44 years ago?
You lost the mustache, though.
Yeah.
And then also, if you want, there's a sticker for
your mom
$4.
does not like mustaches.
Oh, so But if you don't want to pay for a T-shirt, there's little stickers and bumper stickers and magnets and all kinds of cool stuff.
We want this to go viral, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, sure.
Have people running around with these shirts. And they're not that promotional for me either. They're more substantive, you know?
Yeah. All right.
What's that one?
Which one?
The one on the far right bottom.
Finality is not a word we use in politics.
I love that one, too.
It's a
is that Disraeli?
Yeah, it's a sticker, though. It's not a shirt.
Oh.
Yeah. It's $2.
$2 for Disraeli. That's well worth it.
You can put it right on your laptop.
Yeah.
All right.
You don't have one that says I have a big bridge to sell you, huh?
Look, if anybody, this is if people don't like certain things, we might take them down. If we get new ideas, we might put them up. This is an ever-changing store, so we can maybe do a shirt like that.
Sure.
Okay.
Anyway, we got plenty.
Any rate, all right, let's move on. Let's get to some questions.
God, there's one that's like a whole book.
Oh. This is from J. Millwall 6727. They say, Professor, how is this Iran-Israel war different from the Gulf 1 and 2? Is the failure to capture the alleged enriched uranium a regime change, and regime change not a recipe for a future war?
Yeah, I already talked a little bit about, I assume by Gulf 2 you mean the Iraq War. It wasn't called the Gulf War, but Gulf War 1 was totally different. That was back in 1991, and Saddam Hussein had invaded, quite successfully. They really didn't have any defenses. The oil-rich nation of Kuwait, not exactly a liberal democracy, far from it, but a big oil producers. Remember, I've said, if the Middle East was producing cabbages, not oil, we would never, ever have gotten involved there, but that's another story. And so Bush, unlike Trump, put together a very broad coalition to get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. That included our allies and our adversaries. And in a very efficient, very effective way, although lots of nations are involved, of course, America, led by one of the very few post-Korea heroes we ever had, Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf, quickly achieved their objective, a very limited objective, getting Saddam out of Kuwait. And then there was a big debate, right? The path to Baghdad was open. The so-called elite army of Iraq was in retreat. We could have gone to Baghdad, overturned the regime. And his top two advisors, Defense Secretary Dick Cheney and National Security Advisor Colin Powell, advised against it, saying, if you break it, you own it. And, Iraq will descend into chaos. You're going to have civil war among the Sunnis, the Shiites, and the Kurds. So it was a very successful war with a very limited objective, and they achieved that objective clearly, and it was provable. You got them out, and they did not try to get a wider war. That's why his approval rating went up to 90%. It could not be more different than the current military incursion in Iran, where you didn't buy in any allies, where the objectives were not crystal clear, although I suppose if the objective was to totally obliterate their nuclear capacities, it failed. And unlike 90% approval for George H.W. Bush, Trump has 44% approval from the American people, and it wouldn't even be anywhere not that high except for near unanimous approval from Republicans.
With reports that strikes may not have destroyed the bunker in Iran and only set them back by months, do you think the White House will have a difficult time admitting that the strikes were, quote, not successful, an unwillingness to take further action against Iran?
Hey, this is a guy who 5 years later is still maintaining he won an election, that he lost by 7 million votes, where God knows, scores of judges, including judges appointed by Republicans, judges appointed by Trump himself, have all rejected his claims of a stolen election, as did his own Department of Justice, his own cybersecurity agency, every election official in America, most of them Republican. So, truth doesn't matter. I don't know how many times I can stress this. It's purely transactional. And he's counting on the fact that at least his supporters, and maybe others, will only remember what he said and not follow the nuances of the follow-up.
This is from Tashdid Khan. They say,
we can't go through that whole thing.
Let me just read it. I find myself unexpectedly agreeing with Trump recently when he said that Israel and Iran don't know what the F they're doing, referring to their rapid violation of a declared ceasefire. Meanwhile, Americans are increasingly critical, opposed to arms shipments to Israel, but the U.S. military aid continues, roughly $18 billion to Israel since October 23, and over $1 billion annually to Egypt despite its authoritarian regime and refusal to accept Palestinian refugees. In your view, how do remarks like Trump's resonate with or influence public and policymakers' attitudes? And what do you see as the tipping point for reassessing or conditioning U.S. aid to these countries?
I don't see a tipping point for reassessing aid to these countries. This aid has been going on for many decades under Republican and Democratic administrations, Republican and Democratic Congresses. It is not going to end soon, and I certainly don't see any particular change in the negative views of what Trump is doing in the Middle East and in Iran. But remember, he's not even up for re-election. What he wants is, adulation, and he's getting that from his Republican base, so he's getting what he wants.
Is all of Trump's warplay really just him trying to audition to receive a Nobel Peace Prize?
I think that's part of it. He's been talking for years that he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, which is, absurd given, his own actions, the root of all of this violence and war. But it's not just he wants to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. He wants the adulation and support and cheering of his base at home. And despite some dissent by Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, as we saw in the poll, overwhelmingly he's getting it. Republicans in Congress who, were lauding Donald Trump's promises. He's not going to do what those nasty Democrats or, the rhino George W. Bush did and get us involved in, another conflict in the Middle East. That's not going to happen on his watch. And, of course, they've broken their necks turning 180 degrees to support him.
Why hasn't Iran tried to manipulate Trump through flattery like Saudi Arabia and North Korea have managed to do instead of military force which they cannot win with?
That's a good question. I think, their country of power, I'm not an expert in the power structure in Iran.
You're not?
No.
Oh.
And I've never been there even. I've been to Israel, been to Egypt, but not to Iran. Who runs Iran apparently, supposedly?
Ayatollah.
And how old is he?
Old,
even way older than me. So who knows, how nimble and how with it the leadership of Iran is. And, maybe they just are so boiled in their ideology that they can't bring themselves to do it. But it's a very good question. And, maybe someone who's an expert in Iran could answer it.
Professor, this is some Krasimir Boyanov. They say, Professor, do you think that this war will help Dems win the midterms? What else is needed for Dems to grab the love from the masses?
Well, as we've seen from the polls, you want to put them up again? If it's a problem, don't worry about it.
Just keep going.
Yeah. 56% disapprove. There it is. 44% approve. On the critical swing voters, 64% disapprove, 36% approve. So based on these numbers, yes. But the problem is the Democrats have not been, this is now a year and a half we've been harping on this, right, Sam?
Yes.
Democrats have not been able to take advantage of the anti-Trump movements because they have no spine and are the worst party I think I've seen in my study of American politics at developing a simple, appealing, compelling message. And they still seem to be tied to these old, tired, leaders and reluctant, except for Hakeem Jeffries, to promote, younger, sharper, more with it leaders.
Andrew Carlson says, Professor, do you think Dems struggle with messaging because their long-term policies are harder to sell, while Republicans focus on short-term wins that feel more decisive and immediate? That's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think there's a point to that, but that's not the biggest problem. Right. Democrats have plenty of policies to sell in the short run. We've had two big recessions, right, in the 21st century, Sam. 2008 and 2020, right?
Sure.
Who presided, what party presided over those recessions as president?
The Whig Party.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. It was, Republicans. And who developed the policies to avoid sliding into a depression and keeping our economy alive?
The Libertarian Party.
Yes, exactly.
I'm joking again.
Obama and Biden. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows these kinds of things. And we also went through all of the most important measures of the 20th and 21st century that have helped ordinary people. Right, Sam?
Right.
Social Security, insurance of your deposits in the banks, minimum wages, maximum hours, Medicare, Medicaid, Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Affordable Care Act. What party had the presidency for all of these?
The Green Party.
Yeah. So it's not like Democrats have nothing to sell. They just haven't figured out how to sell a very good record and, some very good ideas moving forward. They're just not there.
What's your favorite non-main two parties of all time?
It's a very good question. The Liberal Party of New York.
There you go. Professor Lichtman, what in sports betting parlance is the over-under on Israel-Iran ceasefire holding, i.e. day, week, month, or more than 3 months?
So over-under means will it last until then or not?
Right.
So I think a month.
A month.
Yeah.
That's a good over-under.
That's a good over-under. I'm not telling anyone how to bet because God knows, with Trump and Netanyahu and the Ayatollah, good luck.
True. Christopher Probst says, can you also say a word about the people in the U.S. that are disappearing forever in El Salvadorian prisons? I'm German and I thought, never again. What can I do?
We've talked about this at length, right, Sam?
Yeah.
That Trump is pulling people off the streets without due process, without proof, that they're criminals. I pointed to a study by the Syracuse University. 72% of those detained by ICE have no criminal record. I repeat, no criminal record. And of the other 28%, the vast majority have what kinds of criminal records, Sam?
Like traffic violations.
Exactly. Minor traffic violations, possession, things like that. A minuscule fraction are serious criminals. So what you need to do is support organizations like the ACLU that are challenging this kind of, I believe, unconstitutional violation of people's rights. And if you are a foreigner in the United States, you're from another country, keep a low profile.
What does the House Appropriations Committee do other than ask questions and argue back and forth? Does anything good come out of it?
Not really. You know, one of the worst. What did Elon Musk call it, Sam? Accurately, a disgusting abomination. It's one of the biggest transfers of wealth we've seen.
The House Appropriations Committee.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. This atrocious bill is what came out of that committee.
I see.
You know, one of the greatest transfers of wealth we've ever seen, from the less affluent to the rich. And already, you know, we've discussed this before, right, Sam?
Right.
More than $13 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars over the last, since 1989, has been transferred from, not from the bottom, but from 99% of us to the top 1%. And this is just going to make that worse. And not to mention blowing a huge hole in the deficit. And not to mention cruel. You know, who do they always go after? The vulnerable, the less powerful, the people who are hurt most. You know, people who depend upon their Medicaid for their health. People, and Republicans primarily out in the rural areas who might well lose their hospitals, you know, that they depend upon for their medical care. And they don't seem to give a damn.
Vacuum tubes for hi-fi. One of our good friends.
Oh, one of our very good friends.
They say, I plan on buying some Vietnam War protest tunes on vinyl. Country Joe and the Fish's Fish Cheer song mentions profit as motive for Vietnam. How influential is the military-industrial complex in post-WW2 foreign policy? You know that? You know that song?
I do.
Oh.
It was Dwight Eisenhower, post-World War II, his farewell address after he left the White House in 1960. And he warned about the influence of the military-industrial complex over our lives. And it's sustained by what's called an iron triangle. Do you remember the iron triangle, Sam?
Nope.
Okay. I mean, the words are evocative. It means it's something that's strong and powerful and unchanging. One point of the triangle are the defense contractors, right, who make billions of dollars from the defense budget. Then there's the military, who get all this wonderful hardware from the military-industrial complex, right? And then the third point on the triangle is the politicians, who want military contracts in their state and their district. It is that unbreakable iron triangle that makes the military-industrial complex so impossible to dislodge and so incredibly influential.
Wow, good answer, sir.
Thank you. You didn't know about Eisenhower's farewell address, huh?
I do.
Oh, you did. You're a smart kid. But you tell me you're not a kid.
What's your definition of a kid?
Anyone younger than me.
Then most people are kids.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court's order on Monday allows the Trump administration to resume carrying out expedited removals of dozens of unauthorized immigrants to the country other than their own origins. It says, is this a true stay or is this final?
We talked about that a little while ago.
Right.
I'm not a lawyer, and this is, very murky. But I don't believe it's final.
What are you then? You say you're not a lawyer, you don't know about the opera, you're not an expert on Iran. So what are you?
I'm a runner.
Who and what can help stop the illegal activities of ICE? I find it totally reprehensible and un-American. That's from Everett.
Well, the biggest thing is to overturn the Republican majorities in the 2026 elections. And even before that, to post big victories in the gubernatorial elections in Virginia and in New Jersey, and to support the organizations that are fighting these blatantly, in my view, illegal and certainly dangerous activities.
Still
a big lead. How much is in now?
We're just checking in on the New York primary. 86% in.
7.5 ahead.
Yeah, but
it really hasn't changed.
But he doesn't have this. See how it says here, the election will advance to ranked choice if no candidate is the first choice on a majority of the ballots.
I still don't see Mamdani losing.
Yeah.
He's got a big enough edge. It would have to be a huge switch in the second choices.
So your call, we were saying your call was too soon. It still could be a good call.
I think it's a good call.
Nice. He's always got his good calls, man.
We haven't missed a call yet.
Well,
24. That wasn't a call. That was a prediction.
Oh, right.
Big difference. We were the first ones, even though we had predicted otherwise, True. Right, to call Trump's victory. We did it when we saw Pennsylvania results.
Right.
How much time do we have?
5 minutes.
Do we have good news following this?
Oh, yeah. The Lichtman Live post show comes up right after this on my channel, so you can follow me there. So do you think we'll get... Oh, June 20th. Wait, what's today?
24th.
So do you think we'll get ranked choice tabulations will be released? It says, the AP says ranked choice tabulations will be released beginning of next week. So you won't know until next week who the mayor is?
But we've called it.
We called it. Why does it got to take so long these days for elections?
Beats me. It all should be electronic. You should be able to do it instantly.
Yeah. Let's see how the Republican race is going.
Yeah.
There's only one guy running, Dad. You know who this guy is? Curtis.
Yes, he's the head of some vigilante organization in New York City.
He thinks he's Batman.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, we can take 3 or 4 more maybe 3 more questions.
Okay. Do Republicans in Congress feel that they're going to lose significantly in 26? So somehow they're going to pass this bill now and deal with the repercussions later.
Absolutely. Whether they think they're going to lose significantly or not, they know that their prospects are at best uncertain in 2026. Just take a shift of 4 or 5 seats to, put the Republicans in jeopardy. Maybe 6 seats, I think, is what would it take approximately. There are always, retirements and resignations and things. So about half a dozen seats. That's almost nothing, out of 435 seats, although most are not competitive. So while they may not believe they're going to lose significantly, although I think some do, they certainly know it's dubious and they'd better act now.
Why is Ukraine being barred from NATO and President Zelensky not allowed to attend the summit after being told multiple times by NATO Secretary Mark Rutte that he guaranteed Ukraine would be part of the alliance?
Well, Ukraine is not in NATO. That's a big point of contention. And Trump, I believe, was some time ago, at least from the United States point of view, and we do have a veto, precluded Ukraine's entering NATO. And by the way, Trump just dissed NATO. I think it was today when NATO has the security guarantee, Sam.
Yeah.
An attack on one nation is an attack on everyone, and you're supposed to come to their defense. That's the core of the alliance. Without that, it's a paper tiger. And Trump was asked if he would honor that, and he wouldn't give a straight answer. He said, well, it depends upon your definition, whatever in the world that might mean. Of course, he should have said, I will honor our treaty obligations under NATO, but he didn't say that.
Right. All right. So we've got 4 more pending questions here. Why don't you glance them over, these 4 here, and tell me, you can pick which one you want to answer. I don't think we've ever done that before, have we? Thank you, Nordic Aquarius. They donated and said, I just bought your decal. Thank you.
Let's go to the first one.
Okay, the first one is from James Lagruta. Instead of blaming protesters and George Soros, when will MAGA realize, if ever, that they voted for this, not once, but twice?
You can answer this question as well as I can, Sam. What's the answer?
They love this.
They love this. Anything Trump does, they're going to line up behind. We saw 85% of Republicans lined up behind Trump's actions. The easiest thing in the world one of the most common and I think most pernicious tendencies of human beings is rationalization, right?
Yeah.
And these MAGA folks are masters of rationalization. No matter what Trump has done, no matter how dangerous, no matter how it contradicts what he has said, no matter how it contradicts reality, the law, the Constitution, they can rationalize it.
All right. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. We did a poll based off of our merch. Which design was your favorite? And Republicans have no principles, Democrats have no spine is in the lead with 45%. But I Love Lichtman Live is at 33%.
That's great.
FDR
I wouldn't have
shirt
expected
at
that.
13. Oh, no, your tic-tac-toe shirt is in last place, Dad.
Well, it's 44 years old.
That's pretty old.
That's pretty old, and, different times.
Yeah.
Who was president then?
44 years ago?
In 1981. You should know this.
Reagan.
Yes! You're becoming an historian. Yes.
Wow. Here's the shop if you want to check it out. Some donations that we didn't get to tonight. Jim Fitch, Vladimir Planton, Philip H., Andrew Aguilar. I thought I saw someone donate saying something nice about the hair situation, but maybe I was imagining that. Well, if you did, if you're out there, thank you very much. Dad, what are your final words to the people tonight?
Be fact checkers. We'll fact check for you on this show, but you can fact check for yourself. Never take at face value something that Trump tells you. He said, don't believe your own eyes and ears, only believe what I tell you. Well, my parting advice to you is believe your own eyes and ears.
All right. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for the evening. The good news is Lichtman Live post show comes up right after this on my channel, so make sure you stick around for that. Say good night to the people, Dad.
Good night. We will see you on Thursday.